Man, oh man. I'm not sure. I don't know how long it's been. FAF pod. That's right, Falling in the Forest is back. All right. I can't even tell you at this point when the last time a podcast came out, right? So I'm not going to do the whole thing I do. Every time that I come back from a bout of inconsistency, I give this whole spiel about, well, you know what? Let's follow the way as I ain't shit. Let's follow the way as I ain't shit. Ain't never going to be shit. You can't depend on me, whatever you want to call it. Let's just follow the way as a fresh start. Everybody's gone. It's just me here, talking into the void, which is how I prefer it. We are living in a radically different world, I think, than the last time that I did this. Radically different in many ways, and in many ways not radically different. In many ways, we are just living the natural extension of where things have been for quite some time now. We're living in Trump's America. Again, I think many of us underestimated, which is an understatement. I think many of us underestimated how eager a lot of us were to return to Trump's America. I think a lot of us underestimated how willing to be swayed, right? Just how fickle and how thin the line was between us being able to backslide into that environment and us being in an environment that was post-Trump. Upon rumination, upon reflection, I think that a lot of people misunderstood what it meant for Joe Biden to be elected in the office at the time that he did, and what it meant for Trump not to get that second term immediately. And I think that a lot of us wanted to put ourselves in a mental place where we didn't necessarily have to worry about that bugaboo anymore. But something that is becoming abundantly clear to me about all things, truly, but specifically as it regards to the current political milieu, if that's the correct way to say that, is just how damaged, how fractured, and how disconnected from context the world is right now, currently. How long it's been trending in this direction, and how long it's been that way. And it really does seem to be the root of so many problems that we may not have wanted to reckon with, especially those in political power. I think that it's become kind of this situation where people want to do things the old way, the way they worked. We've been living in a world right now where everything has been a cult of personality for a very, very, very long time. And I think that politicians on both sides have gotten very comfortable playing the personality game, rather than doing the difficult work of trying to create a more educated and a more a society and a country of more sound decision making, one that is able to understand and grasp the world that we live in today, and understand and grasp the root of a lot of the issues and pressures that we're facing today. Again, you're going to hear me complain a lot. Not complain, but I feel like I rant all the time about what the internet is doing to us and what social media is doing to us. And it's a lot deeper than that. What really is becoming apparent is that people don't know how to think. People don't know what to think. Right now, if you just look at the things that people believe in, the sea of misinformation, right? Some may consider it disinformation that is currently taking over the American psyche, right? What public communication has become, which angels of our nature are being appealed to currently, and how that works, and also the significant amount of levers within politics that your average person is just simply not interacting with, not interfacing with, and does not understand, right? When we talk about money in politics, when we talk about political activism, when we talk about hot button topics, how people feel about Gaza and Zionist Israel, things like that. It doesn't necessarily come from a place of understanding. I feel like we are all today in such a rush to be up to date, right? To be quote unquote knowledgeable about things that we really have not done the work that it takes to be knowledgeable about. And sometimes it manifests itself in things that will have you happily on the correct side of the aisle, but with no real contextual understanding of why you're there, right? I'm reminded of a lot of the protests that we saw as it regards to the Israel-Palestine conflict. I'm reminded of thinking to myself, I believe that there is a noble cause being undertaken. I believe that people are on the right side of history with a lot of what they're seeing and talking about. But I wonder how many people truly understand why, right? Especially as it pertains to younger people. I think, and this is some of the problems that we see people having as far as, the universities are radicalizing people, and they're these bastions of like liberal brainwashing and blah 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 blah. Truthfully, I'll be totally completely honest. I think history leans towards progressivism. There's a wonderful quote in regards to how progressivism tends to be on the right side of history. I'm not going to butcher it right now. That is the essence of the quote. And so I think that a lot of that is it's nonsense. It's mishigash. It's people coming from a right wing point of view, seeing that in their estimation, universities have become sort of a stronghold for liberal thinking, which I might add they've always been. Because in my opinion, right, as we have trended in the direction since at least the normalization and adoption of like human rights globally, right, I think that what we deem as progressive thought has really been the only way forward, right, the only way to go. But we also do this thing where we start to divide our thinking, and we start to divide everything into liberal or right wing or progressive or conservative. And I do think that some things need to be discussed outside of the parameters of your tribal identity, right? But to harken back to what I was saying, I do wonder sometimes if even those of us that find ourselves on the right side of certain issues of the day, if even we could use a better understanding, right? And all of this is to tie it back to the idea that I think that we are in a society that is bereft of context. We are in a society that is divided, as divided as I think a society like ours has ever been, and perhaps that's hyperbolic. Our society has been divided from the inception. Certainly, we can follow the fractures of this division back 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years. It's not to say, I don't want to be dramatic in saying that right now we are the most divided that we've ever been. I'm not old enough to say that, and I simply have not done the requisite study to be able to make such a bold claim. But I do think that we stand currently on a precipice. We stand currently on a precipice of knowledge. We stand currently on a precipice of human progression. And what happens now from here on out is as well as what has happened in the last 10, 15 years, is of the utmost importance. And I say that as somebody who now is working a job that is considered federal, right? I'm gonna give myself a round of applause just for having a new job. I don't know how anybody feels about it necessarily being federal now, but the round of applause for me having a new job. That's something that I forgot to share with the people. I'm not gonna divulge what job it is, because that's just kind of never been me. I usually will talk about stuff that I've done after I've done it, right? Like, I'll tell you I've been a salesman before. I'll tell you I've done this before. I've done that. I've done this. But I tend not to get too deep into it, because I just don't think that, I don't find it pertinent right now. I think maybe I'll get to a place where it's important to what I'm saying, and perhaps I'm just not that, I'm not comfortable sharing, right? Maybe I just don't want to open myself up to what anybody may think or may not think. And that's something I got to work out within myself. But I say this as somebody who works a job that you could consider federal, who that will be affected by what takes place in the current administration, who honestly is facing a lot of pressure, and the entirety of the workforce in this particular field is facing a lot of pressure right now as we wait to see if there will be some kind of federal order. And you can probably guess what I'm talking about if you're informed and you listen hard to what I'm saying. If there will be some kind of federal order that will likely be deemed illegal, but by way of executive order, could take place, and really for somebody like me who's just beginning in the field, could be extremely dangerous. To somebody like myself who believes in workers' rights and believes in the power and strength of unions and things of that nature, which could lead to the dissolution of the union that represents us, and really put people like me in a bad way. Specifically somebody who, again, is like, I'm a few months on here, so we don't know what's going to come of that. But again, as I age, as I take new steps in my life, I find that the things that maybe when we were younger, and kudos to those of you who were always active and were never living your lives kind of ambivalently in that way. But these things affect us more and more and more. And I think that the more education that we prioritize, I think that the harder we work to understand the world that we live in and how these things affect us, the more that we will see that all these things affect us. But I say all that to say, we are living in a very, very, very different world than the last time I podcasted. And I've changed dramatically. I've had moments in my life that have changed me dramatically. And as I've always been, as I try to keep at the forefront of my messaging here, is this podcast is more of an opportunity for me to try to work some things out and to kind of document my life, right, and where I am right now, and perhaps to connect with other people, be they younger than me, be they in my age range, or be they older than me, who have gone through, are going through, or will go through similar things. And that's the hope. The hope is that, that we can find some sort of connection, right? The hope is that maybe I say something that you go, you know what, I was kind of thinking that, or perhaps you see me in a space that you feel that I should grow out of, and you can watch that, and you can keep tabs on me, and you can maybe, right, maybe we can create some sort of kinship in the void, right? But many things have happened in my life since I last recorded. I'm not sure whether or not I spoke about going to Jamaica, which for me is very important. You see, Jamaica for me is my fatherland, right? With Trinidad being my motherland, right? And that means exactly what it means. My mother is from, by way of Trinidad and Tobago, and my biological father is Jamaican. Lives in Jamaica, has pretty much spent the I would say the bulk of his life in Jamaica. And I, having been born and raised in the United States of America, have really been entrenched in my mother's side of the family. And rest in peace to my dad, the guy that raised me, the person that I'm talking about when I say dad, the person that we had to bury last year, that I don't know if I ever spoke about, because I don't think I was very comfortable putting those feelings on display. But it's been quite some time now, and I am comfortable saying that. So I was raised by my mother, who is a Trinidadian immigrant, and I was raised by my sister's biological father, but my dad, a man by the name of Marshall, who, again, rest in peace. It changed my life tremendously, and taught me a lot about life, and gave me a little sister. And his passing totally changed me in so many different ways, because I had never dealt with the passing of somebody so close. Some of my only real experiences with the death of close family members, aside from, my great grandmother Marjorie, rest her soul, came through him. came through him losing his parents. He was somebody that I watched lose both of his parents in my lifetime, and watched the way that he dealt with that. And it was one of my earliest indicators that, there is tremendous dignity in the way that you carry on after the people who have provided for you in that way, and given you, and there was complications, right? There's complications. We all don't feel the same way about all of our parents. We all may not have gotten to a place where we could even possibly respect our parents, or come to some sort of meeting of the minds, and understanding each other's virtues. I don't want to belittle anybody's experience, but there's tremendous dignity in the way that we carry on when we lose people of such significance in our lives. And something that has always affected me was not having a strong relationship, I should say, with my biological father. And it was something that I ran from for a long time. I think that the opportunity was there. I think that it was open to me. It was something that I could have had in more magnitude had I sought it, but I didn't. For many reasons, especially, I'll be real with you, man. Life hasn't always gone for me the way I wanted it to. And I had a nasty habit of, I think, just hiding from people who I felt like expected more from me, right? And not giving them a chance to extend their understanding, and to extend whatever knowledge they had, and to extend whatever advice and whatever love and grace that they could extend to me. I've worked on that really, really hard, but I'll be honest, man, like I have friends who I didn't speak to for years because my life it simply wasn't going in the direction that I wanted it to. And I was very ashamed and very afraid. And I was in an extremely dark place for a number of years. I would say probably only very recently had I come out of that dark place. And starting this podcast was in a lot of ways one of my attempts to try to reckon with that. Right. And this is why I always say, like, one of the biggest reasons that I do this is not because I think that I'm some sort of person that's worth listening to. Right. And with all due respect to myself, not to say that like I couldn't imagine being somebody worth listening to. No, but just that my ego is not so large that I was like, yo, people got to hear what I got to say. Like, no, it's not that. But a lot of it really was just a way of kind of like, it's like journaling, right? It's like reaching out and I'm a huge avid listener of podcasts and stuff like that. And that was one of the biggest things for me that it helped me with, was especially battling. Like I've had crippling addiction to like social media and a lot of the negative complexes that the way we interface with social media can allow to take root and grow within us. And one thing that I'll say that listening to podcasts has done for me is just taught me to listen without feeling like without having an opportunity to speak. I had so many times I would listen to people with opposing views on these different podcasts, and I would, because I was on Twitter so much, and because I was on Facebook so much, and all these other social media apps where, like, even if no one's listening to you, you have an opportunity to like add your bit of madness to the fray. I found myself wanting so badly to speak back. I wanted so badly to contest what I was hearing, or to add my flavor that I thought might help to build some level of understanding. But you obviously can't, right? A podcast is something that's pre-recorded. It's a conversation that you're not a part of, but something that I was losing because I was so, viciously addicted. I've got some embarrassing stories that I'll never share. I'll never tell. I will never tell. I got some embarrassing stories about my relationship with social media, man. I really do. So people that are truly, truly, truly lost in that world, in the world of negativity, in the world of trying to funnel all your emotions and everything you think about the world and yourself and other people, trying to funnel that through the medium of 180 characters or 240 or whatever the fucking case may be. Like I can relate to that. No matter how we grow past things and we start to look at other people who exist in spaces that we used to exist in. We start to look at them with some sort of contempt, right? Because a lot of the times we forget when that was us. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll ever have an opportunity to truly forget, because shame is something that weighs heavy on me, right? But let's tie all this in a nice little bow. I was running for a long time from having a relationship with my biological father, even though it was something that meant a lot to me, even though the lack of that relationship was something that had drastically affected my character, had drastically affected my disposition, and ultimately, in a lot of ways, my mood and my idea of the world. And I got an opportunity. My significant other and I went to Jamaica around my birthday, and that was my opportunity to finally meet my father in person. And for me, it was cathartic. It was cathartic in perhaps the biggest way. Specifically as somebody who struggled a lot with identity issues and struggled a lot to try to find my place in the world and amongst family. And on my mother's side of the family, we're not all necessarily particularly close, as far as like a lot of my family is still in Trinidad. And therefore, you just don't have this particularly large unit with which to identify. It was really my mother and my grandma, and whichever aunts and uncles I could make some kind of contact with, but most of them weren't here. And so seeing that side of my family, my father's that is, and seeing where a lot of my proclivities and a lot of that other side to who I am, seeing where that comes from, seeing where that lives, again, experiencing, the land of my father and that entire side of my family, and seeing how it shaped them and their experience, and getting a much, much, much deeper respect and understanding for that culture, which is half of me, right? That culture that I'm from Flatbush, Brooklyn. So like you just are Caribbean, right? Like, let alone the fact that I am of Caribbean descent. You're just Caribbean when you come from Flatbush, fucking Brooklyn. Like it's a similar. I would imagine to coming from certain areas in the UK or Canada or something like that, was just where there's like a strong, strong, strong West Indian influence in certain neighborhoods. You're from that neighborhood. You're more West Indian than most. I'll tell you that much. So it's not like I had no connection to Jamaican culture or didn't understand it or something like that. It's like I've grown up around Jamaican people my entire life. Though my family is from Trinidad and Tobago, which to your average person, you may not see a difference. You may never have heard of Trinidad. I remember sharing that with Biggs. If you ever listen to one of the other podcasts, I do podcasts with one of my dearest friends, and we spoke about that one time. And I was like, I don't think your average American knows what a Trinidadian is. I think it's pretty much Jamaican, and then you find out that there are other places that are like Jamaica, quote unquote. But yeah, it was very moving. It was probably one of the more moving experiences in my life to be able to see where my dad grew up, and to be able to meet family that I had maybe spoken to over the phone or this and the third. Several of my siblings, I'll tell you the truth, I met like 3 siblings that I had never met in my life, right? Like that, I had spoken to here or there, but like, again, these are my father's children. These are my brothers and sisters, and I never met them, and I to an extent, in my mind, probably given up on meeting them. And that bond, that familial bond, to see that people cared about me, and to see that these people my family considered me family, right? It sounds like something so menial, but it's not when you don't have that relationship. And since then, I've been able to be much better at forging and maintaining those kinds of relationships, and I've been changed forever because of it, right? And I've been on a journey of self-reclamation for, I would say at this point, 2 years, maybe 3. I was always kind of fighting to get to that point for a long time, but I had a lot of things going on in my life that I was just attached to, and that I had really formed these negative relationships with, and allowed myself to be kind of the worst version of myself. A lot of behavior that I'm ultimately just really, really ashamed of, and it's been really hard for me to deal with and unpack. But I've been able to take kind of solace in coming out of that space, and kind of reconnecting with the things that make me me, that have made me since I was younger. And one of those things is, just the process of self-education, and the process of reading more and trying to understand the world around me, which is something that was a really, really, really big part of my life for a long time, and then kind of took a back seat to really fighting for my fucking life every day, trying to emerge out of that place as a functioning person, as a person that still had some merit, as a person that could still accomplish some sort of growth, that could still recover from heading in the wrong direction, pretty headlong, right? Like headlong in the wrong fucking direction, and just full of shit and nonsense. And one of the things that I'm currently wrapping up reading is "Amusing Ourselves to Death" by Neil Postman, which I'm sure a lot of people have read. It's a fairly popular book. New editions of it get published all the time, and it's something that seems to be really, really, really pertinent in the society we live now, right? Where it has not lost any of the gravity and pertinence. It probably has taken on more as we've accelerated further and further into a technological culture that kind of rewards amusement and doesn't reward things that are difficult, and doesn't award thinking as a necessary activity, where we want to try to make everything fun, where we want to try to make everything digestible, right? And by digestible, we simply mean amusing, right? Where we get our information about the world around us and the information about history, which has been made infinitely less relevant by the immediacy of the information culture we live in now, where if things haven't happened 10 days ago, then they're no longer relevant, right? Where we have lost the ability to kind of glean the lessons and warnings of the past and of history in much of a scientific fashion, I would say, in terms of like history. These are trial experiments, right? These are the what worked and what didn't. These are the opportunities for us to tweak things that we think could work now that maybe didn't work then, but we have a kind of a better understanding of why they didn't work then. News has become this huge for-profit entertainment vehicle, right? Which I didn't necessarily know how much of a problem I had with that, because to me, since I was a child, that's kind of what news has been, right? On the grand stage. It's not, and not understanding necessarily the responsibility that press has in a democracy, and how devastating shortcomings in that specific arena can be to the populace at large. It's a big part of the reason that we're in the situation we're in now, where we are fighting ignorance, we are fighting stupidity on a scale that was perhaps unimaginable to generations before us, or perhaps it was. Perhaps where we are right now is where a lot of our forefathers and a lot of the people who truly fought to get messages of importance to the masses, perhaps they feared us getting to that point. Perhaps this reality was something which they could all see, right? Which they could all too easily imagine engrossing us. But we are broken. A lot of us in America currently, we're broken. We're not able to interface with complex concepts. We don't have minds pliable enough and flexible enough to parse through information. We kind of just look at everything like sports, right? We look at everything like sports. We got to pick a side and whatever jives with us. And you might like a sports team because it is uniform, or you might like a sports team because you like the way a player played 20 years ago. And we're not getting a good enough handle on information, and we're not forming solid, serious opinions. And as a result, we're not very serious people. Not all of us. I'm not saying that about all of us, but again, like in the society that I think does depend on the collective, I think that a lot of the people in power, a lot of the people at the top, a lot of the people with the ability to do these things have largely left the rest of us behind, with the idea that as long as they could get us to galvanize around the right people with the right ideas, then society could kind of still be pushed in the right, quote unquote, the right direction, right? And I think that is supremely incorrect. a supremely incorrect way to think. And as I begin to unpack these parts of myself, as I begin to kind of reacclimate my mind to context and to subtlety and to understanding meaning, and to trying to be a more active person as far as like consuming the best and most thorough news that I can. I'm trying to be an educated citizen. I find that it's work, right? And like, big deal, right? Like, fuck out of here. Who do I think I am? Oh yeah, it's work. It's fucking work. Yeah, it's work. But I say that and mean something much deeper than what I think I'm articulating. Something that I don't even know if I necessarily have the gift to articulate, right? But when I say that it's difficult, especially in a society that simply does not give us any impetus to interact with difficult concepts, to really wrap our minds around things and try to understand them on a deeper level than we understand them now. And I think we all rush to wear this badge of understanding and this badge of quote unquote knowledge without doing the work, right? When I used to say something a few years ago, and I think that it was something that I was beginning to realize that was like decent. It was decent, especially for somebody who wasn't all there at the time when I said it. But I used to say all the time, like, I feel like when you're young, it's all about learning how to speak up for yourself, how to voice what you think is right, how to speak to other people, and how to express yourself. But I feel like once you get to like 25, going into like 30, like, life becomes about knowing how to shut the fuck up, right? Until you have something to say, until you've digested enough to come to your own conclusions, right? It can't all be about voicing shit and you don't know anything. You can't be comfortable saying that you get all your news from TikTok or Twitter, which Elon Musk is pumping voraciously right now, as he's talking about, he's anti-legacy media and this and that and the third, and X can be the way that you get all your media and stuff like that. Like, dude, that's this. You have to start to understand when people are trying to pull wool over your eyes, right? When people are insulting your intelligence, like, there are simply concepts that cannot be fleshed out properly, that cannot have the necessary context, that you just simply cannot understand fully through 240 fucking characters or 280 characters, whatever the fuck it is. And even if you go for the fucking blue check and you can write to fucking blood clot, whatever the hell you want, it's simply stuff that you need to be immersed in, that you need to steep yourself in for a significant period of time before you can understand it. So, like, the idea, right? The idea that the general populace can just educate ourselves via fucking Twitter posts, via this or that and the third. Not saying that it's not a solid vehicle to get. I think that the medium is the message in a lot of ways. And as with respect to that, I think that there are a lot of things about social media, and X in particular, that don't lend themselves to grasping complex issues. And we could talk about that at another time on another podcast, right? And so I will certainly say that, but I also won't act like it's impossible to get some really, really important stuff. That's not the only place you can get it, but I'm not going to act like it's not impossible to further your understanding of certain things in those arenas. Just that those arenas don't lend themselves to that. And the owner of one of those arenas is trying to convince you that that arena should replace real serious traditional press. And again, these are things that I think that as we begin to move forward in life, you start to really try to grasp certain concepts and grasp certain things. Say what you want. I'm not here to have anybody to form anybody's opinion or help them form an opinion on the founding fathers and what have you. But there was a method to a lot of the madness. Right, and one thing that I think we've understood for a very long time, and that our forefathers understood, is the importance of press in a democracy that depends on an educated populace, right? Otherwise, you take the power out of the hands of the people, right? Because I think we all who are on a certain side of the tracks, who live a certain life, right? I think that we all feel that power in many ways should rest with the people. But an ignorant populace or a people who is simply kept dumbed down, for lack of a better term, is a terrible thing. It's dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous for society at large, and it's incredibly dangerous for the people that live in it. If people aren't going to make that effort, none of this shit matters. You understand what I'm saying? If people aren't going to try their best to be an educated and informed public, then power resting in the hands of the people won't fucking matter, right? Because people won't do anything of any significance with it, and they certainly won't be able to protect themselves with it, because they won't know what protecting themselves looks like. And this is what you see when you see people in droves voting for Donald Trump, again, on some cult of personality shit, because they love him or because he says things that jive with their broken selves, right? Like with the part of them that is the most broken, right? He is able to tap into that and get you to fuck with him in so many ways. And then you see the abolition of many systems and programs that you depended on, right? You see that you're not different, that you thought that you were going to be saved. A lot of veterans who are losing opportunities, losing jobs, losing things that mattered to them, that they needed, that they felt like they deserved, right? Who voted for Trump, who are now voicing, and it happened so quickly. Trump has been in office like fucking 2 shakes of a lamb's tail at this point. It's been like 30 minutes. It's been like 30 fucking minutes. And I feel like I vaguely remember this happening last time he was in office. So it's not even like this is history repeating itself to a point, right? Where you think that this person is looking out for you. You think you're fucking different. And when he shits on you too, when you look up and you see the gaping asshole of the power structure and it drops a hot steaming turd on you, that's a tough pill to swallow, right? When you thought this was for you. But I don't even know that a lot of people even thought that way. I think that people think politics is a game. I think that we are being trained to create these enemies, and we do have enemies. Don't get it twisted. If you're working class, if you're poor, if you're a minority, if you're a woman, if you're trans, you do have enemies. This is a fact, right? But I think we are being trained to see enemies around every corner, and we are being trained to compartmentalize all these different facets of society into another group of enemies for ourselves in ways that create this conflict of interest, in ways that will, and again, we've been primed this way for years, right? Like this is decades in the making, right? This cult of personality shit that I'm talking about, where we're basically, this is like it's politics being commercialized in this way where you just vote on vibes, right? Somebody says something that tickles you in a way that you're never gonna take a deeper look into. You're never gonna examine it. You're never gonna think about why something tickles you. Like sometimes something speaks to a part of you that shouldn't be there. Sometimes something speaking to you is a signifier that something is wrong with you. And that's something that you don't have to share with anybody. That's personal work that you can do on your own. That's the beautiful thing. I always say too, there's certain shit that we're not supposed to see. And it's good. It's good that we don't have to see it, right? If you get out of a relationship with somebody that you're having a really tough time letting go, at least you don't have to sit in those rooms and watch them move on. At least you don't have to go on their next date with them. At least you don't have to sit around with their family as they navigate the world and find a new partner, and their family sitting there like, no, you know what? Him better. we like him much better. Good job. That other guy, right? That's gonna happen. But you're not supposed to be around for it. You're not supposed to see it. The same with some of the work. The same with some of the work that we're doing internally is like, yo, dude, nobody has to see you do this. So the onus is truly with you. It's on you, right? It becomes, if something speaks to you, you have all the time and a right to sit down and think and go, why does this speak? This doesn't even feel like me. Why is this tickling that part of me? And you may come to the conclusion that, oh my God, perhaps I hold in my heart some really, really, really racially charged beliefs. Perhaps I'm more xenophobic than I'd like to think I was. Perhaps I'm not as much of an ally to my community and others as I thought. Maybe I'm not the working man proletariat, in theory, right? In political theory, that I am as far as like lived experience. Perhaps I wake up and go to work every single day and I get my ass beat by the system, but inside I'm caping for the wealthy and for the powerful, and I'm living this eat the rich existence. Like every facet of my existence on a daily should be driving me to really have a problem with what's going on with wealth inequality and wage slavery in this country. However, I'm really hypnotized. I'm digmatized, if you will, by this cult of personality. And I'm like, everybody's an undercover millionaire. Everybody's like 10 minutes away from being the next big thing on Instagram or the next big reality star, and clawing their way into what they perceive to be greater success, right? The greatest success is on the horizon for every single person. System be damned, right? And that's a problem. That's problematic. And if you can't do the work within yourself to wonder, to make stuff jive, like to say like, well, why does this jive with me? And if you can't sit there and do the thinking and get to a point where you're like, it makes zero sense, I don't know why. You're further along if you can get to that point than somebody who can't, right? Like, you're further along if you can get to that point. Fuck action, right? Because God knows, so many people are not ready to take action. And I'm not the person right now that knows how to motivate people to do that. There are people that can do that. I don't want to underestimate the power of that, right? Because we need that. We will need that, and we need it now. But at the very least, we can get to a point where we can kind of spot some of these incongruencies within ourselves and begin to question them, and perhaps begin to do the work, right? I'll get personal for a moment. I'm somebody who's always considered myself very partial to feminist theory and feminist thinking, and very partial to the struggles of women globally. Not until very recently could I tell you that I had fucking read anything as it pertains to that, which is, again, like, you don't necessarily need to be the most well-read. You don't necessarily need to be able to quote bell hooks or to understand kind of like intersectionality. You don't always need to be able to fucking quote Angela Davis to understand revolution and Kwame Ture and this, that, and the third. And you don't have to be right. Listen, I've met some shitty people who got all the buzzwords. I've met some shitty people who are agape'd up. All right, them agape this and that and this and the third and no. Yeah, I feel you. But right, I can only speak for myself and my experience. I found myself more often than not falling short of that. In a relationship that I was in the way I dealt with women, I think, in my everyday life. Some of my biggest shame, some of the things that I will never speak of, are ways that I betrayed what I perceive to be my character in regards to women, in regards to making myself a part of this theater of danger, of this theater of insecurity that women face in our society today. And I say that as somebody who can relate to it, right? I'm not a woman. I don't identify as a woman, but I'm a man. Sorry, I'm a black man, right? I'm a minority. I come from immigrants, literally two sets of immigrant families. So I know what it is like to be marginalized, to exist on the margins. And yet here and still, I found myself marginalizing others. I found myself espousing all of these great, noble talking points about this and that, and this is in bounds, and this is out of bounds, and I could call out every motherfucker. But when it came to myself, my actions, right, with the people in my life who I could touch, there was always an excuse. There was always a reason I treated this woman like this. There was always a reason I said this. I took this action that made somebody feel unsafe, right? That somebody will have to now do the work. And such is the nature of humanity. Such is the nature of being social animals who have to exist in communities and have to socialize with other people. I don't want you to feel like because you have given somebody something to chew on, something that they have to now divest themselves of and become greater than. I don't want that to now be a referendum on you permanently. This is what we will do to each other as human beings. This is a part of living in a community. Your parents have done it to you. You have done it to your cousins. You have done it to your siblings. But we want to minimize harm, especially the older we get, especially the more understanding, the more understanding with which we operate, with which we can operate, right? So again, right, I don't want to necessarily play the whole woe is me card on that, and I don't want to act like we should all live in a world where none of us negatively impact each other's lives at all. It's a part of the learning experience for both of us. But these are simply areas in which I fell short, which are my, I think, biggest shames. Not just with women, but with other people, right? With anybody who I deemed as a lost cause. Like, I'm the type of, like, granted, there are lost causes, right? Again, there's nuance in every fucking situation. There are lost causes, but there was also a time in my life where I was this fucking self-aggrandizing asshole who thought that I was the smartest person in every fucking room that I walked into. I ain't no fucking dummy, but I'm certainly not the smartest person in every single room that I walk into. And I would hope I wasn't, because what the fuck am I doing in those rooms? Right? But yeah, like there's this level of growth that has to be done. And I understand firsthand, as somebody who's committed to trying to grow in those ways, how difficult it can be, and how many circumstances and how many situations and it needs to be a confluence of all these different things to put you on the path, especially if you don't have real mentorship in that way, to put you on the path towards that stuff, towards changing in that way. And I guess let that be what this episode is about. To explain again, a large absence, right? There are things that have happened in my life that I simply, that not that I'm against talking about, but that I don't have it to talk about it right now today, that have prevented me from being as consistent as I want to be with the podcast. But also, like, there was just a lot of personal growth that I think needed to and still needs to happen before I become somebody that can sort of speak in the way that I like to speak. That will make this, in my opinion, something worth listening to. It'll always be worth listening to, in my perspective, from the lens of just human relatability, right? It's just like I need to scream into the void sometimes, and I hope that perhaps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people maybe can glean something, can get something from my musings, right? Because I had so much of my personal stuff has just been, I have to learn from the experience of others. That's what books are. That's what, right? That's what podcasts are. That's what all these things are, right? It's like we are trying to figure things out. We're trying to find patterns of behavior that work. We are trying to work through mechanisms and thought patterns and things that are sitting within our spirit in certain ways. We are trying to work through them, and sometimes just digesting different things help. Right? Perhaps I'm an example. Somebody's listening somewhere and they're like, God, never be this guy. They're like, whatever the fuck happens, I can never be this guy. That motherfucker on this mic right now that I listen to just so I can laugh at, I can't be that guy. And that's still a purpose. A win is a win. That's still a purpose, right? Because hopefully one day I'll be somebody with things to say that are worth listening to. But if I am not, let me be a lesson in the opposite way. Let me be a fool that people can point to and go, don't do that. You should be straight as long as you don't do that. You can do a lot of shit, but if you don't do that, you'll be all right. You see what I'm saying? Make some noise for being a fucking idiot. A goddamn fool. Perhaps that is I. I'm not sure. Again, I'm just a dude. I'm just a guy. It's the whole point of this podcast being called Falling in the Forest. FAF, nigga. You understand what time it is. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? No one's listening. And therefore, I have not made a sound. Nor have I embarrassed myself. And that's the mission. Right now, that's the mission. Anybody who's still around from months ago, I appreciate you for tuning in. I can't imagine that you did, but I appreciate you. Do I even need to say that I'm going to try to be more consistent with uploads? FAF.